Hello and welcome to the Thank You for Knitting YouTube channel. My name is Alana. I am a knitwear designer and a yarn shop owner living in Auckland, New Zealand. This is episode 7 of my standard knitting podcast. It has been longer than usual. We were away at Christmas for 2.5-ish weeks, and since being back, I don't know what has happened to the time, but it's just been, I don't know, January went quickly. So it is currently the very beginning of February, and I did put out my Everything I Knit in 2024 video, parts 1 and 2, last month, but I haven't actually done a standard podcast that I filmed since before Christmas. So there is quite a lot to catch up on. Before I get too far, I should mention what I'm wearing. This is one of my many ranunculuses, or ranunculi. I think I've made 7. This one is modified in several different ways. For information, you can check my Ravelry project page. I always modify the necklines. I always change the cast-on. I usually change the needle size. I changed a lot of things. The primary change visually on this one is I didn't want the holes in it. So instead of the eyelet section, I did this kind of single sort of gentle cable right in the middle. So that's here. And I'm really, really pleased with it. It's great for summer. We're in summer here. It's hot. I used long lino, which is a 100% linen sort of chain structure yarn, DK weight. And I used mostly the long or lang, and then I used some Erica Knit Studio linen on all of the edges, here, and at the bottom, because I was tight on yarn. They're both in this lovely army green color, and yeah, it's my summer shirt. I have quite a few things that I've finished between now and the previous episode, some of which at this point feel like a long time ago. And I've got quite a few new whips because it's the new year and my Frogger finish restriction was over, so I kind of quickly cast on quite a few things, which was fun. And so I've got a lot of different projects I'm working on. And I thought about doing a sort of plans video or some kind of video that was related to my takeaways from Everything I Knit in 2024. I don't actually have enough to say about that I think it deserves its own video, so I'm just going to say a few things at the beginning of this episode about kind of my takeaways from last year, a little bit about how that works into my planning for this year, which again won't take long to talk about. And I also know that I've been talking now for more than a month, or really a month and a half, about my summer knits video. Part of me was feeling like it's so far into summer, we're not summer planning anymore, but it is hot here, it is muggy here. There is still plenty of time for summer knitting, in my opinion, and so I would like to still talk more about summer knitting. I'll see if I have time to do a little bit of that today. Otherwise, I will do it in a separate video, and I will do it soon. But otherwise, this is just a standard sort of podcast episode. I'm just updating you guys about what I've been making, what I've been working on. So yeah, I guess let's get straight into the projects. So there are several gift knits that I've finished since the last episode, which I have gifted. And I mentioned them in my Everything I Knit in 2024 video. So I don't want to go on and on about them. They're small, they're pretty simple, they're gifts. I obviously don't have them with me because they've been given away, but I will just quickly sort of shout them out and then insert a photo and then move on. Feel free to ask more questions if you have any, but I already feel as though I've talked about them enough in my sort of Everything I Knit video, and yeah, there's not too much to say about them. So the first finished object was the chicken coasters that I made as a gift for some family of ours who live and work on a farm. I showed these in my quick gift knit ideas video back before Christmas, before the holidays, and I did end up making them for these family members. I think they're extremely cute. They're crochet. I think I did them all in less than 2 days, maybe 1 day. It was very quick. I used miscellaneous scrap yarns held double, so I used various 4-ply yarns held together. I used the recommended crochet hook, and I don't think I modified the pattern in any way. Yeah, there's not much to say about that other than inserting a photo, telling you that I think it's a great pattern. They were definitely received well. I think people liked them and they thought they were cute and funny. They're also functional. Okay, the next finished gift was a Georgie Beanie, which I'll insert a quick photo. This, I believe, was my 6th this was my 5th one. I've got my 6th one with me, so I'll just cover them both right now. So I made 2 more Georgie beanies. There's the one I'll insert a photo of, and then there's this blue one. So this is a broken rib texture. It is a beanie that starts from the top down, which I love because you can customize it to the amount of yarn you have. I tend to make these in possum merino because they just make perfect gifts for friends and family who live overseas. And yeah, I quite like this pattern. It's classic enough that it's very wearable, but it has that little extra texture detail that makes it look really nice. Georgie beanie. This is one ball of the Brushtale yarns, possum merino, one of my favorite yarns that we carry here, just favorites in general. And that's all there is to say about that. So that's Georgie number 6, and the pale sort of beigey colored one, caramelish colored one that I'll insert the photo of. That one uses Zealana Rimu DK, which is another possum merino blend. It's another beautiful yarn that we carry here. And again, it's just one ball each per beanie. So that was 2 gifts. This next one I ended up working on because I had the yarn with me while traveling, and it was a quick project to cast on because this pattern is pretty straightforward and good for travel knitting. In the end, I sort of ran out of people to gift it to, so I'm going to save it for the future and gift it to someone when I am in need of a gift. So that's that. 2 Georgie beanies. The next finished gift was the pair of mittens that I talked about in the Everything I Knit video. They are just garter stitch. They were for my stepmom who loves mitts, fingerless mitts, and she specifically requested a pair that would look similar to a pair that she already owns that are just in garter stitch. So I just kind of replicated what they looked like, and I think they look really sweet. I'll insert a photo. I might write up a pattern because I think they're quite nice. And again, I used Brushtale yarn, possum merino, red, and less than 1 skein for a pair of mitts. The last gift that I finished before Christmas was the gnome that I knit for my dad, and again, I'll insert a photo. It's Nice To Gnome You by Sarah Schira. I talked about it a little more in my Everything I Knit video, but it is a very cute gnome. He can put his little hands in his little pockets. He's got a nice beard, and yeah, I think my dad was happy with him, and I think he's pretty cute. Now, I finished a couple of other things. So toward the end of December, I brought this while traveling, and towards the end of December, I finished my Alpine Bloom. So you guys have been seeing this since my very first episode, number 1, when it was a whip, and I finished it right before Christmas. Here it is. So I am really, really pleased with it. If you recall, I was considering frogging it and not finishing it. Then several of you actually pointed out that you liked the colors and you thought it would suit me. And I kind of agreed, which is I think why I was procrastinating on frogging it. So I did end up finishing it, and I absolutely love it. I really like the yarn combination, the colors, the fiber of this yarn. It's the Alpaca Yarns Luxurious Fusion for the main mustard color, which is a primarily silk and linen blend with a little bit of alpaca and a little bit of merino. So it is definitely a summery yarn. It is a fingering weight or 4-ply thickness. And yeah, that's the mustard color. And then I used some handspun yarn, which I think was a silk merino from my friend Bonnie. She spun the yarn, and I used that for the contrast color. I knit the size number 3. It is Alpine Bloom by Caitlin Hunter. I mentioned this before, but I just reversed the chart to knit the lace on the sleeves instead of knitting it separately and grafting it on because I was feeling lazy. I also shortened the lace on the sleeves to match the exact length of the lace on the neck. And I have worn this already. The yarn is super soft and lovely. And yeah, I am really pleased with this. So fabulous finished object. Made it in time for the end of the year. So this was part of my Frogger finish in the finish category. And yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled with this garment. As you wear this yarn, it just gets softer and softer because it's, as I say, it's mostly linen and silk, and those plant fibers tend to just really soften over time, which is super, super lovely. So that's my Alpine Bloom. Very, very happy with it. Now my first finished object of the new year, so this did not quite make it into my goal of finishing before the end of the year, but I finished in the first few days of January. And this I feel very accomplished about because I started knitting this back in April 2023. So it just weirdly took such a long time for no real reason other than I am designing it, and I would reach these kind of mental blocks where I would just find it easier to do other things. But as I've said before, this is part of why I love the Frogger finish, because it just pushes me enough to finish things like this, which is now a super lovely vest. Sorry, I'll show you. I'll stop talking about it and show it to you. So I love this vest. This is a design of my own, which I have not yet finished the writing up of. It's actually proving to be a little tricky to write certain bits of it. It's a little bit of a different construction than I've ever designed before. I've never designed a vest before. So I originally saw this type of stitch pattern in a finished garment. I was walking by the window in the mall and I saw a sweater that I just really liked the look of the texture. So I analyzed the knits and purls, and then I sort of replicated what that texture looked like here in this design. It's just a combination of knits and purls, but I think it creates a really lovely, squishy, waffly looking texture. And I used an 8-ply plus a mohair. It's Prosper yarn. The color is called Not Old Lady Red, which I think is the perfect red. It's sort of a rusty, warm-toned, orangey-based red. And the pattern is knit bottom up. And I ended up re-knitting the armholes, I think 3 times with different ideas. I was going to do an I-cord. Well, I was going to do ribbing, then I was going to do an I-cord. And what I landed on was actually just this rolled edge, which is perfect. I'm very happy with it. So that is the finished vest. I'm totally happy with how it fits, how it looks, everything about it. It's got this double fold neckline. Yeah, I'm really happy that I finished it. And the next hurdle is figuring out how to write it up properly. Now my next finished object I will also talk about in a separate video. This is the emotional support chicken. So I won't waffle on because I am putting out just a quick little video specifically about the emotional support chicken because we ended up visiting the shop in LA that created the emotional support chicken. And so while I was there, I bought the kit for it, which comes in this cute bag. Comes with everything you need to make your own chicken. So I bought this kit from the Knitting Tree LA, and I knit this chicken while traveling. So they had a ton of different types of chickens that they had done, and one of the newest ones they had was in this yarn, which I don't remember the name of. I'll insert it on the screen because I've got the label somewhere. It's a yarn that is, I believe, 100% acrylic. I think it might be King Cole brand, and it just does all this cool color changing. And yeah, they had just knit one like this, and I said, I want to make that exact chicken. So they kind of created a custom kit for me. This kit might be out now, but it came with 150 grams of the yarn, plus all the bits that you need to make the chicken. So yeah, as I said, I was knitting this mostly while traveling and driving around. And then when I got home, I stuffed it and finished all the little details. And I have an emotional support chicken, guys. I finally have a chicken. I've been hearing about these chickens and seeing them everywhere for the last couple of years, and now I finally have my own chicken. So this was a very exciting object to finish. I do not think it will be the last chicken that I knit. Now, since I'm done with finished objects, I want to give a quick status report on the whips that I brought into the new year. So as I would have mentioned before, I always do my frog or finish personal challenge before the end of the year. There were some people who joined me, which was really fun. And I had 10, I think, whips, 9 or 10 at the beginning of December. And part of what was happening is I was casting on a lot of new things while finishing old things because of the lead up to the holidays. So I think I started the month with 9 or 10. Now I ended the year, my Prosper Yarn vest, which I finished in the first couple days of the new year. What that means is that I have 4 whips that are now being carried with me into the new year. So the first is my Forever whip, my Marie Wallen Primrose sweater that you've seen before. My next one is my Battenberg blanket, my big crochet blanket that I'm doing out of scrap yarn. That also, understandably, takes time. The next one is my Inga sweater, which I was starting in the long distance yarns. I had only done the neckline and I have yet to knit the entire sweater, so I'm bringing that into the new year. And my fourth and final whip that I'm bringing into the new year is my Seta Surrey jumper, that sort of golden colored one with the 2 strands of the fluffy Surrey alpaca yarn, which is another design of my own. Currently I have finished the body, it just needs sleeves and a neckline. So I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with basically coming into the new year with just 4 whips from the previous year. And then January hit and I was like, my gift knitting is done, my Christmas decoration knitting is done, my Frogger finish limitation is over, and now I can cast on whatever I want. So I have casted on 7 new projects. And they are all in various states of activity. So I will show you what I'm working on. Okay, so the first new cast on, which I started in the beginning of January, is for a new knit along that we're doing here at the shop, which is our summer shawl along. And we started this because several of us, we were a little bit missing out last year on the WestKnits mystery knit along. We chose not to do it because we were busy, but then we ended up thinking it was really pretty. And I also have wanted to knit the Aurora cabin shawl for a long time, and I just never really was finding the time. But we just thought, you know, when you're in the summer and you're going on different holidays, or you're heading to the beach or driving around, I don't know, something about the idea of just having a large shawl to work on felt right. So we started the summer shawl along, and it's going to be running all the way through the end of March. So it's essentially a 3-month knit along. So it's very long. It gives people a lot of time. It's very casual. We were inspired originally by some of these large Stephen West shawls, and 3 of us here at the shop are knitting large Stephen West shawls. But the knit along itself, you can do any shawl, any size, any designer, doesn't matter. It can be a whip, it can be a new cast on. The point is we just want to knit shawls together this summer. So I finally cast on, as I said, the Aurora cabin shawl, and I ended up going with quite a few colors put together. So I'll just insert a photo quickly of my inspiration shawl. So this was a project I saw on Ravelry, not the original one from Stephen West, but one user on Ravelry made this version specifically of the Aurora cabin shawl that I thought was so beautiful. I just really liked the color choices that they used. So my colors are similar to the inspiration photo, but a little different. Mine are a little moodier, I would say. And I ended up picking sort of extra colors, I think, because I was just trying to hobble together the combination that I wanted. First of all, this is in my super cute bag. Shout out to my bag. This is the Gracie project bag made by friend of the shop, Olivia, and I've been using it a lot. She started making these leather strap extenders, because normally the bag has little handles, which you can configure in different ways. But then she started making us this strap extender, and now I'm kind of throwing it over my shoulder, and it is a fantastic bag. It's totally a daily bag. It doesn't have to just be for knitting. Anyway, total side note, but that's my Gracie project bag by Fiddle Design Studio, available here at the shop. And it's big, so it's a really good size for this shawl, which has a lot of yarn. So I'm using a variety of yarns. The first one is Yarnfloozy Machinist, which is a yak merino nylon. This is Black and Rainbow. Love this color. That is my dark color. Then I have this Yarnfloozy, I think it's an MCN, so it has a little bit of that cashmere in it. And I don't remember the name of this color, but let's find out. Eos. The color is Eos. And it's this lovely pink with speckles. Then I have this is a stash yarn. This is Pearl Soho Linen Quill. And the color is Honey Pink, which is a very pale, not so pink, it's more creamy, beigey tone. And then, oops, and then I have Spincycle, and this is Goldie. She's got all this like pink and orange and gold. And then I have this beautiful yarn. This is an old stash yarn too. This is Manos del Uruguay. Fino, I believe. No, Marina It's technically a lace weight yarn, but it's a single spun merino and it's working fine. It's a little thinner than the other yarns, but it's beautiful. But those are sort of the main colors. And then what I was missing was this kind of minty bluey green. So I've added the minty blue and this orangey gold Setasuri fluffy alpaca silk yarns. So together, these are all my colors. And yeah, I technically have 7 different yarns going on. And what I quickly started doing is just changing to whatever color I felt like. So rather than following the pattern and doing color A, color B, color D, C, E, whatever, I'm just doing whichever color feels right at that moment, especially because I have more colors anyway. And anyways, this is my progress. So I'm very happy with it. That's really the direction it should be going. It's going to block open really beautifully, I think. Yeah, these stripes are cool. Now, I have finished the stripe section and I have significantly fewer stitches than he says I'm supposed to have. So I'm just deciding right now if I want to do extra stripes, put in a bunch of rapid increases, or maybe just proceed with the number of stitches I have. I don't know what happened, but with something like a shawl, I really don't feel like I can be bothered ripping a bunch of it out. I don't want to rip out all these stripes, so I'm probably just going to find some way to just keep going as I am because I'm not that fussed. I get the gist of the stitch patterns and I think I can fudge it with my stitch counts anyway, but that's my progress. That has been really fun. And I've put it down for a little while just because I have the wrong stitch count, but I'll figure it out and I'll keep going. Our knit along is 3 months long, so I don't feel pressure to rush on it. And I suddenly cast on a bunch of garments, so I've got those as well. Okay, my next cast on I started on January 18th, and this is now part of a knitting plan that I want to mention. So last year I ended up completing 12 pairs of socks, which I was very pleased with. I didn't plan it very well. I wanted to knit 12 pairs of socks, but I did not organize it very well. I just was way behind, and then I knit a bunch in October, and it just all worked out in the end. But this year, I want to have a more explicit goal of finishing 12 pairs. And this year, I would like to cast on a pair every single month. I don't have to finish the pair within the month, but every month I want to cast on a pair and then finish them before the end of the year, however that works out. So I started my January socks. And the yarn I'm using is really pretty and also special. It's from a brand called Utopia, and it's called Wisco Sock. Now, Utopia is based in Viroqua, Wisconsin, which is a very small town that happens to be my hometown, where I was born and grew up until I was 12. And it's a little town. It's a very little town. And so meeting anybody from my town is very exciting. And the fact that there are cool people making beautiful yarn from my town is even more exciting. And so when we went to Rhinebeck 2 years ago, I think it was, I found their booth and I bought a few different yarns from them. I bought some sweater yarns as well, but I also bought this one skein of sock yarn from them. And the color is called Hudson Valley. And it's just so pretty. It's dark and moody and variegated. And I've started my sock, so you can kind of see, hopefully you can see the colors. And I've actually started doing the same stitch pattern that I have on that red vest I completed. I'm playing around with that stitch pattern on this sock. I might turn it into a pattern at some point. And yeah, so that's kind of my progress there. I obviously have not made a lot of progress on this sock, partly because of all these sweaters you're about to see, but I'm just glad I started it. It's my January sock. Now it's February. I'm going to have to start a February sock. And before the end of the year, I'm going to have to finish them. So that's that. January sock. 2.5 millimeter needle, just like always. And yeah, making up the pattern. Okay, my next recent cast on was also cast on January 18th, same day as those socks. I went through a burst of casting on for sure. So we are in summer. We recently this year got in a new summer yarn, which is the Amano Sammy 100% Peruvian Pima organic cotton. Now, I am not always a fan of 100% cotton yarns, but this yarn is very different than most cotton yarns. They call it like the cashmere of the Andes or something, and it is truly so soft. So this is it, the Amano Sammy. It's a very silky cotton, very different than most cotton yarns I've ever worked with. And I really wanted to try it out on a garment. So they call it a DK weight yarn, but to my mind, it's bordering on a light DK. I think it can be used kind of like a sport weight as well. So I wanted to make a t-shirt with it, and I've been kind of in the mood for something frilly. So I've cast on, it's called the So Frilled Tee by Nicole Thorsten Knits. I'll insert a photo. My plan is to not have a frill on the bottom of the shirt, but to keep the frills on the sleeves like she has in the original version, but I'm also going to add a frill at the neckline because that's mainly where I want the frill. So I've casted on, and instead of knitting the neckline first, I just cast on and started with the instructions that are right past the neckline so I can pick up later and do the frilly top. So this is it. So it's a raglan. There's short rows. It's a bit of a modified raglan because I think you knit like a raglan and then you knit plain for a little while, sort of in a yoke style. So that'll be interesting to see. It's meant to be relatively fitted, but I want mine to be just a little bit looser than the photo. So I'm making size medium, and we are on a 3.75 millimeter needle, which I think is a great needle for this yarn. And yeah, it's just so soft. So I'm really keen to see how that knits up. The color I'm using is called Clay 1806, and I believe I will get a t-shirt out of 5 skeins. So I've got 5, that's my plan. And yeah, that is one of the garments I'm working on. Now the next cast on I started was on January 25th, and I was kind of doing some planning for things I wanted to make this year. And in the course of planning, I just wanted to start a lot of things right away. I also, in my life, I'm often traveling back and forth between places, or I'm busy and I'm in between stuff, and I have time for knitting sort of in between stuff. So I like to have projects that I can quickly grab and work on without thinking too much. So it actually works well for me if I start a few things and then I have them going, and then when I need something to grab, it's just ready to go, rather than thinking about sizing and thinking about getting the needles and starting and all that. So I started a lot of things, and now I have things on the go that I can grab. And so one of the projects I wanted to make this year is the Doppio sweater by Seung-hee Hong. And this is a bulky weight sweater, and it is a compound raglan, so the rate of raglan increasing changes to create a nice shape that kind of curves around your shoulder area. And I've just seen so many versions of this jumper look really beautiful on different people, and it's just a fun way to have a really cozy warm sweater. And also it ended up kind of working out with the yarns that I wanted to use. So I'm using 2 very special yarns. So I got these yarns separately, and then ended up, it felt like a magic moment when I realized I think they'll work great together. So my friend Bonnie, who is the dyer behind Union Fiber, she and I we do trades from time to time because I have a yarn shop and she dyes yarn, so sometimes we trade yarn, and we were doing some sort of a trade, and I requested a jumper quantity of her Surrey alpaca base, and I kind of just sent her some photos of what I liked, and she did a custom dye for me on the Surrey. So they're all caked up now, but it's this beautiful kind of, I don't know how to describe it. There's plummy bits, there's orangey speckles, there's kind of some bluish looking speckles, I think. It's hard to describe the color, but she dyed this for me, 4 skeins of it, which is super lovely. And I was trying to figure out what to put it together with. And I ended up having this other yarn from my friend Lester, who is the dyer and owner of Prosper Yarn. They have this great yarn I've knit with before called Epic, which is their custom spin, woolen spun, 100% New Zealand half-bred wool. And this color that they dye is called Twizel. It's one of my favorite colors of theirs, with like gold and kind of plumish brown and orangey tones. And again, hard to describe. This one leans a little more in the yellowy gold orangey direction than the union fiber, but together I think they complement each other beautifully. So I'm holding one strand of each. Epic is like a worsted weight yarn, but it blooms nicely, so it could be knit like an Aran weight. It could almost be knit like a bulky weight. It's a very bloomy yarn because it's woolen spun. And then the Surrey is lace weight. So I held one strand of each together, and I cast on the Doppio sweater. I'm doing the 3rd size. I'm using a 6mm needle, and it's just been super quick, super fun. This is it. I know it's the wrong sweater right now because we're in the middle of summer, but I just felt like knitting it and I wanted a cozy big knit. I don't know, I was in the mood for it. And so I'm really pleased with how these colors are coming together. I'm currently alternating skeins of the main color in the body. When I do the increases in the yoke or raglan, I usually never alternate skeins because if the length of your row is constantly changing, I don't worry about pooling so much. But then once you get to the body where it's straight, then I think about pooling. So now I'm alternating just the main color. And yeah, it's just been fast, mindless. It's so soft and cozy. And I'm sure I'll get it done before it gets too cold here, and then I'll have a nice new sweater to wear once the weather calls for it. So that's my Doppio sweater. The next cast on was cast on January 28th. This was sort of like a purely indulgent cast on. I have so much Spincycle at home. I sort of covet certain skeins of Spincycle because the colors are so beautiful and unique, and every skein is truly one of a kind. So sometimes when I find really special skeins, I just save them and covet them. But I don't know, part of what I'm feeling heading into this year is, and that's part of why I'm knitting these 2 really special yarns for my Doppio sweater as well, is I was thinking, instead of saving these things that I love for some future date, we should just use them, you know? Rather than saving all my favorite yarns, just use them. Knit with the yarns you love. So that's part of what my thought process was. And I have quite a few skeins of our custom Spincycle color Miss Rumphius stashed at home. And I just thought, I kind of want to make a 100% Spincycle sweater. It would just be so lovely. And I was also inspired by BB. She is a podcaster also based in New Zealand. I will mention and shout out their podcast quickly. They are called Just Another Knitting Pod. It's a couple who do the podcast together, BB and Steven, and they both knit. And I do recommend watching their channel. They also started, I think, around the same time as me. I think they started mid to late last year. But they have quite a few videos up. They've been very consistent with their podcasting, and I've been enjoying their videos. And so, anyways, BB made the DRK Everyday Sweater just all in Spincycle. And that was part of what inspired me to do that as well. I've always wanted to make the DRK Everyday Sweater because I like the look of the fit of it. It's a more fitted style. And I thought, oh, if I just do that all in Miss Rumphius, it will be stunning. So I cast this on. It's looking a bit scrunchy, so it looks smaller than it will ultimately be. It will also block open a bit, but there it is. So I grabbed 7 skeins of Spincycle, dyed in the wool. This is our shop color Miss Rumphius. These were some of my favorite skeins that I've kind of saved over the last few years. And yeah, I'm just sort of managing the yarn as I go. I'm mostly letting it do its thing. I mostly just micromanage where I join 2 yarns together so that I make sure there's not a harsh line in between skeins. Otherwise, I'm just letting this yarn kind of shine and do its thing. It's so pretty. It's been so addictive, as Spincycle always is, because you're just watching the colors change, and it's just, yeah, it's so fun. So I'm excited to be knitting this. I'm excited to have it to wear. And yeah, I'm making the 3rd size. What else to say? I'm knitting it on a 3.75mm needle, which is a great needle for Spincycle. And yeah, just look at Miss Rumphius. So pretty. But that has been very fun. And my final recent cast on is another one that I've been wanting to knit for a long time. So this is the Metamorphic Sweater by Andrea Mowry. This pattern has been in my queue for, I think, a couple of years. I bought the pattern a while ago, and I've always wanted to knit it. And then the Spincycle crew started a knit along for it. I think it's called the Metamorphic knit along or something like that. But they're hosting a cal, which I think just goes throughout the month of February. So I cast on February 1st. I had this yarn in my stash, which is the Spincycle Versus. So they don't do this yarn anymore, but I had stashed this color, which is Beets and Bears. It's kind of like a very acidic green, I would say, like a very limey kind of green. But then the Verses are always marled, so it's like a gray marled with this kind of bright green. And I am combining it, of course, with Miss Rumphius. So I was originally gonna combine this green with the Pick Your Poison color, and then I ended up grabbing a few skeins of this and I thought, no, this is what I really want. So I'm doing a lot of knitting with Miss Rumphius right now. And yeah, I'm also knitting the 3rd size, and the main needle of this is a 4mm needle. But I cast on February 1st, and this is my progress so far. Oops. So basically you're knitting on the knit side, but you end up wearing it with the purl side showing, which I think is fantastic because the purl side of these stripes looks really, really cool. So my Spincycle is just starting to change color, and I think it's looking really nice. So this has been very fun. Again, it's pretty mindless at this point. I'm doing some increases and then some stripes. It's fun watching the color change, just like it always is with Spincycle. So that is another fun cast on. So I also have one other project going that I'm working on. It is a garment. I'm not going to show it or talk about it because it's part of a design collaboration that I'm doing. I actually started this a few months ago, last year, but it got backburnered for the holidays, and now I'm back to working on it more actively. But again, I'm just not going to talk about it until we get closer to the collaboration kind of coming out and having a plan around that. So that means, yes, I'm back up to having 11 whips, but that is right there in my comfort zone. I'm very happy with that. I think this brings me sort of nicely to talking just a little bit about my plans for this year and my takeaways from last year. So I would have probably done this differently had I recorded this right after filming my Everything I Knit in 2024 video. I was not judgmental to myself, but right after filming that video, I definitely had some thoughts about, oh, I wish I had knit more garments, and why don't I have more wearable items, and you know, kind of having more opinions about what I knit. But I think the bottom line about my takeaway is that I knit what I want to when I want to, for the most part. And I try to combine that with knitting, you know, garments that are functional. I'm always also balancing the fact that I'm knitting with yarns we carry at the shop, or I'm knitting shop samples, or I'm knitting my own designs, or working sometimes with yarn companies and doing collaborations. But fundamentally, I generally knit what I want to when I want to. And I'm going to keep doing that. I enjoy knitting. I love it, and I don't want it to feel like a chore or a duty, so I'm going to continue to knit what I want to when I want to. If I were to have a couple of just general goals for this coming year, I have a goal. It's not really a goal, but I am giving myself permission to knit fewer items overall. We'll see if that happens or not, but I would be very happy to knit fewer items overall. I don't need to knit the same number. I tried to do that last year, but I just ended up knitting a lot of things around the holidays, which is totally fine. But I will be very happy this year to knit fewer items. And the other thing I would like to do is knit a few pieces for my wardrobe, which I know are going to be boring to knit, but that I really want to have. So I would love to have a relatively lightweight, very long cardigan, which is kind of a boring thing to knit, but I know it will be so nice to have. I often feel in my wardrobe, oh, I wish I just had a kind of a lightweight, long cardigan that, you know, you can throw on over stuff. I've also always wanted to have a sort of slightly fancy cardigan. which will probably be lightweight as well. Now it might be a wrap cardigan or it might just be a cropped cardigan. I don't know quite what it will look like, but sometimes I have to dress up a little bit and wear a dress or a skirt. And it's events like those where I wish I had just some little cardigan that you can put on over top of a slightly fancy outfit that looks fancy enough to work with the outfit, if that makes sense. Most of my knits are really warm and woolly and functional and practical and all that sort of stuff. I'd like to have a slightly fancy cardigan. I'd like to have a long cardigan. In general, I would like to have more cardigans. As always, there are quite a lot of things that I've put in my queue. I change my queue constantly and I'm okay with that. So that's part of why I'm not making a knitting plans video. I'm not going to make a bunch of plans for my whole new year. I always have things in my queue and then I always end up casting on what I'm inspired to at that moment, and I change my queue all the time and I'm okay with that. So I don't think there's any purpose in me talking about a bunch of plans if I'm not going to end up doing them. The other very general plan is, as I mentioned, I came into this year with 4 carryover whips, and I would really love to deal with them this year. I've made some progress on my Battenberg blanket. I intend to finalize both of the sweaters, and I would like to finish my Marie Wallin sweater this year, that big color work one. I'm going to see how it goes, but it would be really nice to finally finish that one. Not least of which because the pattern and the yarn are both beautiful and they deserve to be finished, they deserve to be worn. So hopefully I can clean the slate in that way, continue to clean the slate in that way. And as I mentioned before, the only other general goal I have is to complete 12 pairs of socks before the end of the year. So I'm gonna go with that plan. And I'm going to continue to knit with yarn that I love and yarn from my stash and yarn that I've been saving, saving for that perfect project. I'm going to really try to just use it. So that's it from me. We've got the ShawlAlong going strong. I've got my other projects going. I've got patterns hopefully coming soon. And one more thing I wanted to bring up. This year I have plans to do some yarny chats with some local yarn dyers who are friends of mine. This is a relatively small industry and we are living in a relatively small country, so we kind of know each other, and a lot of the yarn dyers are my friends, and we've got some great dyers, and I wanted to have some chats with them. Not so much in this formal interview style, but more just chit-chatting, and I thought a really good way to do that is to actually answer your questions. So please let me know if you've got questions for yarn dyers, and this could be about anything about techniques of yarn dyeing or what it's like to run a yarn dyed, a hand-dyed yarn business, questions about color, about process, I don't know, the sky's the limit. Even just questions about working in this industry in general, I don't know. I thought it'd be really fun to get your questions and use those questions as an inspiration where we can sit down and talk about the things that you guys would find interesting. So please, in the comments, please let me know questions you have for yarn dyers. This could be questions for me too. You can ask, let me know if you have questions for what it's like to own a yarn shop or questions about pattern designing. Anything goes. I would love to hear your questions and use those to plan some future videos and hopefully bring some interesting content. So that is all I have for today. Those are all my projects. Let me know what you're working on. I hope you guys are knitting and enjoying yourself and having a good start to 2025. I can't believe, January's over. We're already on month 2 of 2025. So let's have a really good year. And let me know how you're going. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again very soon. In the meantime, happy knitting. Bye.